Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld, and I am delighted to be joined by Joshua Graves today. Hello, Joshua. How are you?
Hi, hello. I'm doing good, man. It's lovely to be here.
It's you're here with us, but you're also in a place that I think is very interesting because you're in Joshua Tree, and I've been waiting for someone to like name my hometown after me. Like it's Brooklyn, but could it be, I don't know, Luklin? I'm just jealous. Joshua Tree is where Joshua Graves lives. How
Yeah,
you engineered that, I just don't get. But
it was a tremendous undertaking. And also naming all the trees after me. It gets a little repetitive, but we have fun with it, right?
that's
I guess
right.
I guess I'll stop there.
Well, I mean, hey, I know people are very interested in where you live, but they're also going to want to
Yeah.
know that you've got a book out. It's a Rosenfeld media book. It's actually coming out technically 5 days from when we're recording, which is April 15th. It's called We Need to Talk, a survival guide for tough conversations. You're the author. You're also the founder of Lost Horse Labs, a human centered design company. And you're an artist on top of all that who does some pretty wild stuff, some of which made it into the book and some of which is making it into how you're sharing and promoting the book. You got a kind of spooky flavor to you and your art, and even in the book. So, talk a little bit about that, and then let's get into the book.
Yeah. Well, I've always enjoyed having my hands in a lot of different pies. I will always be learning and tinkering with something, and so sometimes it's working with digital art, sometimes it's working with something that's physical. I've always enjoyed spooky stuff, and if you've seen some of my posts recently, there's a lot of Goosebumps inspired alternate covers for the books that cover topics that you might encounter in there or in one's real life. So yeah, I'm always exploring and having fun, and spooky stuff is my vibe, as the kids say.
Well, it's also an interesting metaphor to bring to tough conversations, right? I mean, we have these horror stories of basically, I mean, nobody who's been in not only our industry, but any workplace can escape with whether you're an employee at the very bottom rung or a C-level person. You've been through some horror stories when it comes to communicating with people in the workplace. Joshua's book is all about helping you. And I'm really excited by that. I think I mean, obviously, it's got some relevance beyond just the design world. And I'm just looking through the table of contents right now, Joshua. And I've been doing this in a lot of other settings where I'm mentioning the book. You've got whole chapters devoted to things like addressing pay inequality, staying strong when people are being pushy, disrespecting boundaries, how to build psychological safety on your team, mediating with multiple people. I mean, these you've got like 20 chapters like that, and it's like, oh my god, who doesn't need this? No, like how how did you find your way? Is it because you like horror stories that you were drawn to this topic or this set of topics? Tell us your story here. How'd you get there?
That's a fun lead in. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've wrote this and I've just been billing it as real life horror because some of the stories that people have told me, one person in particular comes to mind where they were like, my therapist does not want me to talk to you about this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So yeah, it's just a fun merging of my interests and the spooky stuff, but also I just have this deep curiosity about the patterns that we find ourselves in, why we think the way that we do, how we perceive things the way that we do, how much of that is malleable. And you may recall that this book took nearly 5 years
Oh my
to
god,
write.
was it really that long?
Yeah. Yeah, I started in earnest in 2020, and I feel like we started our journey together in 2021-ish.
And what a
And
5 years they've been. Talk
oh,
about horror stories.
indeed, indeed. Yeah, yikes. So, yeah, my story with this was I didn't have much of a framework for this growing up for how to have conflict with people. So, mostly it was yes, ma'am, yes, sir. Or if I was on the playground, I could punch a kid, but we don't do those things. That does not translate to anything good for anyone.
As
So,
good as it may feel, yeah.
indeed. But I found myself in these situations where I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know how to resolve it. And I would go to sleep with my stomach in knots. I would have lots of anxiety about this. And so that led me to do some research in psychology, neuroscience. How do we negotiate with people? And so I learned a little bit about how our brains are structured, how we tend to react to things. Learned about the brain's structure itself. Like there's this thing called the amygdala that can act as like your brain's smoke detector, and it intercepts all of the thoughts and interprets them. And if it sees something that's a threat, it immediately says, all right, cool. We're diverting all our blood flow. We're going to turn into the Hulk. We're going to go smash some stuff. Let's get at it.
Or run away, right?
Or run away or fawn or a lot of these like uh, fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses. And how do you work with that? And how do you once you get past your own issues, how do you help someone else see clear to the bottom of the issue that you're facing? And that led me down a lot of really wild, interesting rabbit holes. And I'm really, really happy that I was able to put a lot of that stuff into the book.
Was there a particular rabbit hole that you found especially helpful? Like you mentioned neuroscience. It sounds like studying the brain's biology or anatomy. Actually, it was pretty useful. Was that the case, or were there other areas that just really kind of hit just right for you?
Yeah. So I think about some of the work that I do just outside of this for fun as an artist or a writer. You want to understand your constraints. And this even has application in the things that we do with design, with UX, with engineering. You need to know what you're working with. You need to know your materials so that you don't bend something so far that it breaks.
Hmm.
And so part of the way I was looking at this is that, okay, the constraint is my brain is built a certain way. Society has evolved real fast comparatively, but my brain perceives those weird Slack messages that I get, those emails that I get with the same level of threat that if someone was actually going to punch me in the face. So understanding those constraints helps you figure out like, oh, here's what I can do. Here's what I can work around. Here is what is probably outside of my control or influence.
It's interesting. So, and I love that you're framing this as constraints, and you're making me think also of the sort of design materials of conversation, right? I mean, whether it's the level of hormones in your bloodstream when someone is threatening you, or whatever it might be. But I want to dig into another constraint, which is time. In other words, there's a big time aspect of, you find yourself suddenly in a situation. You often, with tough conversations, you don't have warning. They just sort of crop up on you. And it's tricky to be ready. Now, your book goes through, as I said, many chapters that are centered on difficult scenarios. And if you had the book handy and you're reading it as you're dealing with the scenario, that might be really helpful. But what can you tell our listeners who find themselves suddenly in a situation and need to kind of recenter themselves before they open their mouths and react in ways that they may regret.
Yeah, the first thing that we're gonna be doing is we wanna make sure that we try to stay aware of what's happening. Check in with ourselves, check in with what's happening in our bodies. And sometimes it means that if this is something we're not prepared for, that we take a pause, we take a deep breath, we say, just can you actually give me just a second? Because your brain needs oxygen to let this stuff breathe. You need to think about it a little bit. You're going to get caught unaware by these things, and you're still going to fall victim to how your brain reacts to these situations. But, and this is a big, big but, you can train yourself.
Mhm.
And so if you find yourself working these ideas in your daily life, like I had to scope a lot of what I wrote to fit with the work and professional life, but everything that I have in this book, you can take, you can use it with your mom, your dad, your wife, your husband, your partner, your friend, guy you're buying a car from. All these things, it all tracks. And if you can work something in very small ways, like try rephrasing a tough question to yourself.
I'm just sort of thinking about situations that a lot of people find themselves in where especially where there's a power imbalance. So the boss suddenly is in your face and the boss is upset. And it sounds like a strategy that you're encouraging us to do is to buy time, like repeat back what the boss is saying so you're understanding what they're upset about, but you're giving your body and your brain a chance to just buy a little time and maybe pull it apart, whatever the situation is, and start understanding a little better. Is that kind of what your advice would be? What you're in that situation where suddenly something springs up on you, training yourself to repeat something back, or are there other strategies?
Uh, I feel like I should have asked you to be a co-author here because that was really well put. Yeah, so if the boss is in your face, what do you do? You want to understand what might they be upset about, and y- 9 times out of 10, what's on the surface is not the same as what's underneath. And most of the upset, most of the hard feelings, the anger flashes, it says more about the other person than it
Mhm.
does you. But we've internalized this because of how we see power structures. They can be kind of scary, and some folks are more comfortable speaking to authority, other folks are not. And there's some examples that made it into the book about that on both sides. But
Yeah,
if
your
you
book is for people on both sides of that power imbalance, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons it took me so long to write, because I have one lens of experiencing the world. My experience is not everyone else's experience. And so how do you understand the dimensions of one's identity? Because all of those play into how you react to a situation, how you perceive a situation. And yeah, so there are multiple dimensions of that, and it helps have a more universally applicable way of working through these situations, because you've got something that's authentic to you, not what I say. It's not a paint by numbers. It's I'm giving you some tools, take what works for you, leave the rest. Maybe come back for it later. It could be something that you can pull out in another time.
I love that because, you're the authenticity of who you are, you the reader, is, who that you're unique, you're different. The tools that Joshua is covering, I don't think are gonna be the same for everyone in this sort of confrontational situation that you might find yourself in. And as you're talking about this, Josh, I'm thinking about how we're often somewhat paralyzed or constrained by how we feel we ought to be. So let's say my role at Rosenfeld Media is of a boss. It's not a comfortable role for me. It's not really authentically me, but I am in this position, and I'm constantly like, how do I navigate what people expect from me versus who I really am when I'm suddenly in a situation where unanticipated, where I'm practically in a mode of panic. Speaking of the constraints of time, though, I think it would be a good moment to take us into a quick break. And when we get back, I'd love to dive into some of the specific situations that you're covering in the chapters, but just to give people a little bit more flavor of how you're helping folks navigate these difficult conversations. So, everyone, we'll be back with our conversation about conversations in just a moment. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm going to give you 5 reasons you should be using the Rosenverse. First one, where else are you going to find 100 events that you can attend for free every year, 2 a week, about product management, product design, and UX design, plus a highly engaged Slack-based community of over 13,000 of your peers. What else are you going to find in the Rosenverse? You'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings of conference presentations and community session recordings, all in one place from a single search browser interface. And behind those hundreds of recordings are hundreds of experts, people who have advanced the field, people who are your peers who are doing interesting new things, all in one place. Why else should you use the Rosenverse? We've been advancing the field of UX since 2005. You're going to find the most advanced content on such topics as design operations and program management, UX research, and a host of other topics, from climate UX to civic design to how designers can work better in product organizations. Lastly, you've been trusting our content since we started back in 2005. Whether it's our books, our conferences, our community sessions, well, we think you're going to trust the way we've brought those all together so that you can spend less time searching and browsing and more time learning and benefiting. I hope you'll try out the Rosenverse, and I hope you'll consider upgrading to a gold paid membership because it brings you a lot more. Not only do you have access to hundreds and hundreds of recorded conference presentations, but you also get access to the Rosenbot, which is a ChatGPT 4 level chatbot that we've been training on all of our content, including our growing collection of nearly 60 books and counting. It's all there, it's all great content, and the Rosenbot is a cutting-edge way to get at it. You can try the gold membership out with a trial for 2 weeks. Give it a try. Hope you like it. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review, where we're having a conversation about conversations with Joshua Graves, author of our newest book, We Need to Talk, a survival guide for tough conversations, coming out April 15th, 2025, 5 days from now. Joshua, we were going to dig into one or maybe two of the chapters from the book. You got some tasty stuff. Where do you want to start?
Let's talk about when folks lose control, because you made mention earlier of the boss who maybe flew hot there for a second.
Right.
One of the things that you want to try and do is slow it down. And that can mean slow it down and take a breath, slow it down and say, I need a moment. Can you just hang on for a second? And one of the reasons that that is helpful is when we are in this stress response, we find ourselves reacting immediately without thinking. And so if I'm having a tough conversation with someone, I try and speak a little more slowly, not so much that it's weird that I sound like a robot or I'm buffering. It's so that we can have a moment to process the words that we're hearing and be aware of the stories that starts to make echo in our heads. And we naturally get more oxygen to our brains when we
Mhm.
do that. And it helps us stay present. It helps us stay thoughtful. And we can we can do any number of things. Questions are kind of an irritant to like an out of control brain. So if you ask them, where is this coming from? How did you get here? Asking questions that start with what and how are immensely more helpful than why did you do that?
Mm.
Because if I ask you, why were you such a jerk to me? There's a lot of assumptions built into that, and it's probably going to trigger you to be a little bit more on the defensive, like, well, buddy, you made this joke about pirates, and I don't like jokes about pirates. And for reference, the joke is, why do pirates have such a hard time finishing the alphabet?
Why is
And
that?
it's they always get lost at sea.
All right. Got me.
There it is. Got him. Um, yeah, so slow down, ask questions, and just realize that at nearly no point are you obligated to stay in a really hard, hot conversation. You can withdraw for a minute. It's also helpful to make sure you come back to it if you do withdraw, because that gets into avoidance, and when you start to avoid those really hard things, they just kind of acts like a rubber band. When you pull it back and you
Mm.
let it go, it just the further back you pull it, the harder the snap is.
Well, I like that metaphor. That's really great. And it sounds almost as if, like, in that scenario, you're having a conversation with yourself while it's happening. Like, you may be coming up with the questions, and it's just
Yeah.
which questions? It's like you're breaking the fourth wall in a sense.
Well, yeah, a lot of this, and there's a lot of intention behind how I set a lot of this stuff up. It's checking in with yourself first, because we have a role to play in these situations. And if we can figure out what stories we're telling ourselves, how we're coming into these situations, it's going to make it a lot easier to understand, like, oh, this is where I start in this conversation. This is how I come into it. This is I'm learning how this other person might be coming into it. And once you understand and check in with yourself, you can navigate nearly anything else you want, because
Mhm.
you're like, oh, this is a horrific conversation that is incredibly unsafe, and I do not want any part of it, because you know what your values are, you know who you are. Um, and I just want to take a moment to talk about what happens when people lose control. At no point do I want anyone who reads this book to come away with the idea that you're supposed to speak in a certain way, that you need to speak like a robot, that I've heard the tone policing term several times, and I think it's really applicable here. The things that drive us, we want to be very cognizant of them. And there is sort of righteous anger, there is unjustified anger. It's who's hurting here because of this? Like, are you hurting someone because you're being angry? Are you hurting yourself? And that can kind of help you process a tough situation with a whole lot more ease.
Well, in a way, I think what you're saying is, at that moment, rather than just reacting, which means you're not really in control, slowing things down long enough to remind yourself that you have agency in the situation, that you have some control, certainly of yourself, and your willingness and desire to continue engaging in whatever that situation is or not. But that's your choice. And you don't have to stay and react. Uh, and it's not only good for yourself, it's also good for the other person, right? Because they may have lost control of themselves and they need to reestablish their own agency over themselves and the situation. And you're kind of opening the door for both of you to have a better outcome, not just for yourself to protect yourself, but for the situation, of the scenario to go better. Hey, Joshua, we got to wrap up. I really wish we had more time, but we do have to get something from you before we wrap, and that is a gift for our listeners. What's something, in our tradition of the Rosenfeld Review? What's something they should know about or might find interesting that they didn't know about when they started this podcast?
Oh, wow. That was a very ominous opening. We must get something from you.
Yes,
I like
yes,
it. It's very spooky. On brand for both of us,
exactly.
apparently. Um, I so I've been enjoying this band recently, and it does have application to what we do in our day-to-day lives, personally, professionally. The band's name is Lord Huron, and they're just they deal their music has a lot of themes of mystery and listening and seeing what's out there, and it can spark some personal revelations. And I think that that is really applicable to what we do in our lives by making sure that we just take a second and listen. And by listening, we can actually understand and see what really is in front of us versus what's in our head. And it opens us up to this world of possibilities and magic, honestly.
Oh, I love
So
that.
give them a listen.
Lord Huron, like the
Yeah,
lake.
indeed.
And you're just giving me one last thought, which is that maybe in a way you're encouraging us to take the opportunity to listen to the music of the conflict, the conversations we're in, even if they're conflicting. Just give it a minute, slow it down, have a
Yeah, you got to
listen.
sit with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might not like it,
You might
but you
not,
get,
but I like this conversation quite a bit. It's spooky and conflicting as it could be. It's just a great topic, and I really appreciate your sharing your take on how to help people get through tough conversations, which is uh, what you're covering. And we need to talk a survival guide for tough conversations. Joshua Graves, thanks for joining us on the Rosenfeld Review. I can't wait for people to start reading this book coming out in 5 days.
Lou, thanks so much. Really appreciate you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.